Erev Tov Rabotai, we're continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Shabbat. We're up to Perek Vav, Mishnah Vav. Today's Mishnah should be Le'ilui Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Aranbaev Neriyahu ben Burcha Israelov Menuchatam Began Eden. Amen. The Mishnah begins, Yotzin Besela She'al Hatzinit. A woman may go outside on Shabbat with a silver coin tied to a wound on the sole of her foot, which the Mefarshim explained the image that protrudes from the coin, the fact that it's made of silver, which generates moisture, and its hardness, all combined to heal and protect the wound, as the Rav points out, and the Mefarshim point out based off the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, page 65a. Since the coin is tied to the foot for healing purposes, it is not considered a carried item. Rather, it is like an article of clothing or jewelry, which may be worn on Shabbat. Again, the Mefarshim quote the Shulchan Aruch in Chelek Or Chaim, chapter 301, Halakha 22 and Halakha 28. Habanot kitanot yotzot bechutin va'afilu bekisimin shebeoznehen. Young girls may go outside with the threads or even the silver slivers of wood that are kept in their pierced ears to prevent the holes from closing, which the Mefarshim explain. Girls would have their ears pierced when they were young, but not wear earrings until they were older. In the meantime, threads or slivers of wood were inserted into the holes to keep them open. The threads were decorative, so they are clearly considered like jewelry. And even the slivers of wood, which were not decorative, were also permitted because it is normal for young girls to wear them in their ears. Arviyot yotzot re'ulot. Jewish women who live in Arabia may go outside with most of the face wrapped in a veil, as the local Arabian women do, as the Mishnah says. The Mefarshim explain, women in Arabia wrap their head and face completely in a veil, leaving only their eyes uncovered. Since this is a normal way of wearing a veil in Arabia, going out with it in this manner is not considered carrying, as the Mishnah Berurah explains in chapter 303, Sivkat 71. Umadiyot, Perufot, and Jewish women who live in Media may go outside with the strap of one side of their cloaks fastened to a round object that protrudes from the other side of the cloak, as the local Median women do. Now, the Mefarshim explain, in Media, women would press a round object like a stone or a nut against the inside of their cloak to create a bulge or protrusion on the outside. This served as a makeshift button around which a strap was wrapped to keep the cloak from falling off. Since this was the normal way of buttoning one's cloak in Media, the inserted object was considered part of the cloak, and so it was allowed to be worn. If you would see the illustration, it would help show how it was used to make sure the cloak was kept on, it wouldn't fall off. The illustration in the article elucidated will help a person understand this case. V'chol adam. And in fact, the Mishnah says any woman may go outside wrapped and buttoned in this manner, not just those who live in Arabia in Media. But the rabbis mentioned women who live in Arabia and Media because they were discussing the usual cases, which the Mefarshim point out in the time of the Mishnah. These fashions were common among the women of Arabia and Media. The Mishnah therefore discusses Jewish women who lived in Arabia and Media. However, the same is true for women who live in other places as well. And that is in Rabotai Mishnah Vav. Mishnah Zayin now continues from the discussion of the previous Mishnah, but it discusses various round objects that may be worn as a button in the Median style. Again, I recommend looking at illustrations to help understand the Mishnah clearer. Porefet ala even v'ala egoz v'ala matbea. A woman may fasten the strap of her cloak over a stone, a nut, or even a coin and go outside on Shabbat, which Mefarshim explained, no one will suspect her of using her cloak to carry these items on Shabbat, because it is obvious that she's using them as a button, which is permissible, like we just explained in Mishnah Vav. Ubilvad shelo tifrof lechatchila b'Shabbat, provided that she does not fasten the strap over the coin for the first time on Shabbat, which the Mefarshim explain, a coin may be used as a button on Shabbat only if it had already been used for that purpose before Shabbat began. Otherwise, it is a muktzah item which may not be handled on Shabbat, which the Mefarshim explain. Coins are muktzeh, meaning they're set apart from use on Shabbat, and the rabbis prohibited handling or moving such things on Shabbat. If one had used the coin as a button before Shabbat began, it is not muktzeh, because using it in this manner changed it from a prohibited coin into a permitted button. However, if one had merely planned to use it temporarily as a button, but had not yet done so, it remains a prohibited coin, which may not be used for anything on Shabbat. Again, we're reading it how the Mefarshim bring it down. The same is true in the previous Mishnah's case of a coin that's used to heal a wound on one's foot. If one had used it for healing before Shabbat began, it's permitted. But if one had merely planned to use it temporarily for healing, it is muktzeh. And the Mefarshim quote the Pri Megadim in chapter 301, Orach Chaim, number Sivkat 41. Now, the preceding applies only to the coin. In the case of the stone, although it's also muktzeh, there's no need to actually use it before Shabbat begins for it to be considered a permitted button. Since a stone has no other use, merely planning before Shabbat to use it for this purpose is enough, as we see in Orach Chaim, chapter 303, Halakha 22. Only by the coin you actually have had to have used it. Planning is not enough, but by the stone, planning would be enough. And Mefarshim conclude by saying a nut is not muktzeh at all and may be used as a button, even if one did not plan to do so before Shabbat. And that is in Rabotai today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.